Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Tony Sirianni podcast. I am thrilled to have our friend Steve Condon, who is the president of D.A. Davidson Trust, with us today. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm glad. I think I'm looking forward to this conversation because, little known fact, I actually used to work in a trust department at one time, but it was for a sleepy bank where people would bring pillows in and sleep under the desk. So, I've always been fascinated by how does all this work if somebody's. But you've got a totally different attitude towards it and kind of make it a little bit exciting. And I want to talk about, how using trust services, can help an advisor, do several things. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is client retention, right? I mean, I think people don't necessarily think of it that way, but let's talk a little bit. And there's like bad trust ways to do it and good trust ways to do it, right?
Yeah, sure. I think traditionally in an FA's book, they handle publicly traded securities and maybe some private equity. And clients own assets, maybe more assets outside of that realm. And all of them have
Real estate, right? All that stuff.
Exactly. Real estate, collectibles, oil and gas, timber, all maybe family legacy properties.
Yeah.
And they all have a concern about how are these going to be taken care of if I'm no longer here? Especially if it's a second or a third generation, it gets more and more focused with maybe one person in the family, and the others maybe are ill-equipped. And so people ask me all the time, what do you do? And I used to say, oh, I run a trust company, and they'd glaze over and bring a pillow,
Right.
and so today I answer that, well, I sell peace of mind. And then I want to hear about that. And so the trust company is a terrific way of expanding the relationship the FA has, with their clients. And so that might include the use of a special needs trust, if they have a child who may be getting government benefits or,
Yeah, it's an incredibly flexible instrument. It's like one of the most flexible instruments we have. But in a lot of traditional capacities, an advisor, or a client, or the client gets advised, it's probably without the advisor being there, but to take these assets and move, or they die and the assets move to a trust at a bank somewhere else, and then the advisor's cut out from it, which may not be what the client wanted, initially, or really had thought it thinks about.
Yeah, you're spot on, Tony. More and more we see traditional trust companies, and they want to take custody of the assets. They will terminate the relationship with the FA. They'll move the assets in the trust company. The trust company will continue to manage those. And you know what? At Davidson, it's all about the client experience, and we want to be there through life's key moments. And so having a stable figure in their financial advisor who they know and trust, and be able to continue that relationship with them, and then wrap the fiduciary services around it, extends that relationship, maybe infinitum, but it's just a better client experience.
I mean, it's amazing to think that, so much is done the other way around, because it's the advisor in life that was listening to the problems and the issues and has dealt, like you said, special needs, right? I mean, that's something you have to believe that a good advisor is talking to their client about all the time. How are we going to handle this? How are we going to handle it? And talk about peace of mind for the client, right? That at least this person that I've been talking to and known, played golf with for 20 years is going to be able to, help this child or person or keep this family asset, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So the other thing we talked about, because we did chat about this earlier, was the how using a trust service, or especially one that's in-house, right? That's, let's call it advisor-friendly trust service, right? But that an advisor can really expand the book that they have and the relationship with the client.
Yeah, there are a number of ways. I mean, to start with, the FA doesn't have to give up the assets,
Right.
but then secondarily, we see this a lot in areas where housing values have really gone up in value, and the client passes, and when we're named as the trustee and maybe the executor of the estate, that existing book of business will stay with the FA, but then maybe they own a $2 or $3 or $5 million home that the family no longer needs. So the home gets sold, those assets come into the trust, and before you know it, it's a much more sizable account for the FA. So in fact, at our company, trust accounts are about 4 times the size of the average brokerage account. So if you're an FA,
that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah,
And also there's application to an IRA too, right? Do you want to talk
yeah,
about how that?
yep. So in a traditional brokerage account, it would be very difficult to own like investment real estate.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
not a
totally.
publicly traded security.
They make it a pain in the ass to do anything like
Yeah.
that.
And
Yeah.
so, if the IRA is held in trust, we can theoretically invest in anything. We have to value it and do all those things, but for clients that want to invest in that way, we can do that at the trust company.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest advantages because for sure, clients are talking about that with their advisors, right? Or if they, especially if they have a, heavy on equities or something like that in another part of their portfolio. This is other than that, you have to buy a REIT. You couldn't buy the real estate that you actually know. You know your town, right? What you're doing.
Yes.
Or
Or have a
somehow,
concentration, would be a challenge. So
yeah. Um, what about some of the, I think every advisor has, one or two clients that would sort of make sense to have family office services. You know what I mean? And oftentimes those people split up their accounts. So I'm going to put 10 million here, 10 million there, 10 million there. And the ability to offer, and I'm just going back to my trust knowledge, you can offer services that are akin to family office stuff, correct, through a trust relationship, and the advisor can kind of use that as having their own family office services.
yes, for sure, Tony. At Davidson, we're trying to surround the client and meet them where they need to be met. So if they need family office type services, what could that be? Well, it might be they just need bill pay. That they're traveling, they want someone to make sure that the vacation home bills are being paid and it's being looked after. Or they're probably using a partnership or an LLC structure to house some assets. It might be that rental property that we talked about. And it would be better if it was held in trust so that it can move down a generation, not have to be bifurcated and split between different family members. It can just stay in trust. So again, you alluded to it earlier, the flexibility, the total flexibility inside of a trust, it can really be valuable.
Well, little known fact is I did go to law school, and Wills Trust and Estates was my favorite class. Although if I'm your lawyer, you're in terrible trouble. Just start.
I don't believe so.
You really don't want me to be your lawyer. But I was fascinated by trust because of that, flexibility. And I do think it's interesting because so many people offer family office services, and it's not necessarily something that's needed for the majority of clients, but here's a chance to sort of, supersize for your right clients and then maybe attract other ones that are this like-minded. You don't see advisors talking about it.
Yeah, I think that's true. We do, kind of outside of our traditional trust business where we're serving as trustee, we can serve as agent. And so again, that's the structure that we use for paying bills. So we can
Yeah.
open up an agency account, they can hire us, and then we just fund the account once a quarter with kind of what we think the bills are going to be. We have a human review them and log them and check them for, hey, is this in line?
Right.
We had a client, vacation home, huge water bill one month down in Arizona. Well, the pool cleaning company would come in the morning, the water had evaporated down, they'd throw a hose in it, and then they'd go do the rest of their jobs and come back at the end of the day, water's overflowing, total waste of money. And so, just having somebody look after it for the client gave them that peace of mind.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, his quote was kind of funny. He said, well, if you're spending that much time on my $1,000 a month water bill, I can't wait to see what you're gonna do with my $25 million trust. So
Oh, there you go. That's
good business for us.
Yeah, yeah. And so, also life insurance, we didn't talk about that, or insurance, that there's an application for trust in that too.
Yes. So irrevocable life insurance trusts, ILITs. Many trust companies are shying away from them because of liability. You
Yeah.
miss one premium payment, not a good outcome. We have a relatively robust practice in ILITs. And so there, the trust owns the insurance. So when someone passes, it's already in trust. It can go to other beneficiaries, and you can avoid getting it back into the estate from an estate tax standpoint. So very efficient. We haven't talked much about taxes, but trust can really help.
Well, let's talk about that. There's a new tax environment around, right? And so there's some notions around, well, what do I really even need to do? But there are a lot of taxes that can be insidious. They'll sneak up on you, and so tell us a little bit about how you work with advisors and their clients to mitigate as best you can.
Yeah, and it's maybe the most talked about part of our business today. So with the federal exemptions as large as they are, 30 million-ish for a couple, many people, the federal estate tax isn't an issue. But we have an office in Washington, the state of Washington, and we have a big state estate tax, and that's becoming more and more
And
common.
people don't know that exists. They look at the big number. Oh, okay, I'm not going to owe. But yeah, state tax, and every
Right.
state's different.
Every state's different. We're also federally chartered. So we're under the guise of the OCC, which means we can operate in any of the 50 states. So we have an office in Nevada. Nevada has no state income tax. They have no state estate tax. They have a 365-year rule against perpetuity. So you can set up a generation skipping trust, and
Yeah,
it can live on for 365 years. And they have good credit protection law. Credit protection is another big benefit of a trust. If you're a doctor and you might get malpractice,
yeah.
we can move you to Nevada and put a wall around those assets after 2 years.
Well, just any businessman today, the businessman, businesswoman, the world is litigious, and they don't mind going after your assets if they can. Are most do you set up a lot of things in Nevada because of that? I mean, Alaska used to be a state. They used to talk about Alaska trusts all the time, and
Yeah.
so Nevada's
Yeah.
big.
Alaska, Nevada, and South Dakota, Wyoming might be kind of the top four. South Dakota and Nevada, the best two consistently. South
Yeah.
Dakota's law on perpetuity is forever. So it's not 365, it's forever. For most clients, 365 years is long enough. I think Nevada maybe has a little better credit protection law, which is why we use, in fact, they have a special Nevada self-settled asset protection trust.
And then, yeah, then another, and I've heard of all of those trusts, but you know what? I just assumed that the tax-free states had no estate tax, and that's maybe a bad assumption to make.
Yeah, I'd have to look at each one, but I
Yeah,
think that's true. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Well,
okay.
Washington is a good example. We don't have a state income tax in the state of
Right.
Washington, but we do have a state estate tax. So
Yeah.
yes.
Um, other ways to use trust, we did talk about how you would sort of position it to maybe develop new clients, you know?
Yeah. Yep. I think today, things have evolved. I mean, when you started out, you had traditional stockbrokers and they, commission based and like, and then you went to packaged products and mutual funds and professional asset management. And that they had to justify their being then. And then they moved into kind of goals-based financial planning. Can I afford to retire and,
Right.
run an analysis? Like the next thing is fiduciary services. This, baby boomer generation that's moving into that phase of their life now, that 70 trillion or whatever number you hear that's going to move downstream, a lot of that is moving in trust. And so those that have a well-coordinated trust company, those that are, I think our model is exceptional, marrying the great services that the advisor can provide and wrapping fiduciary services around them is a win for the client. It
Yeah.
extends that, um, providing trusted advice through life's key moments paradigm.
How do you make, well, look, two things. One is how do you, I mean, you can talk about how you do it there, but it's also a general question. How do you make advisors aware of where and when might be an appropriate time to use, a trust? And we said a couple of things. There's special needs. That makes perfect sense, I think, to most people, but maybe there's a dollar number in your head, or maybe there's, how should advisors be looking at it when they look at their book? I mean, hey, I got $150 million that I manage. What should I be looking for? And then how do you train them would be the part two of that.
Yeah. So we're in the offices a lot. We have trust officers assigned to every one of our offices. And we're in the offices a lot. We send out white papers a lot. We have good collateral materials that help. The best way to learn though is by doing. And so you'll start out with an advisor who maybe doesn't know much about it, and we'll pull up alongside them and talk to their clients, and maybe we'll review their documents and give them some idea of what the document looks like it says today. And that may be or may not be what they want. And so then it opens up a conversation. And many clients just talk to their advisors about their investments, and the rest of the family, the peace of mind stuff, is in the background. And so once you can show up with a solution, hey, we can solve
Yeah,
that
yeah.
problem for you. They're all for it.
You said something interesting, which was about reviewing documents. I mean, if I'm an advisor and I talked about, it can be, you get this welter of, big stack of legal docs, and you just kind of this is not my wheelhouse, so I'm putting it over here and even look at it. But what you're saying is you can review those with
Yes.
an advisor. And how movable, let's say you look at it and you say, well, here's their current trust situation. This is what we think would be a better, option for them because of a tax reason, or just because you get to be involved.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
It's a great observation, Tony. Very astute. In the trust world, everything is document driven, and so the document may say this is the trustee, period,
Right.
and that can be problematic or more of a challenge. Then you have to ask the trustee to resign and move it, or you can petition the courts to move it. In Nevada, another benefit is we can sometimes decant the trust. So you take the old trust with more restrictive language in it, you create a new trust, similar in terms of it can't be substantially different, but it can maybe remove some of those older, more restrictive languages, and you decant from one trust and put the assets in a new trust with better outcome.
Wow. So, well, that would be right there would be an enormous service an advisor provides to a, wealthy client, or
They
family.
think they're trapped, and they're
Yeah.
not.
Right. Well,
Mhm.
that's great. So, and then you would help them with that. And then also maybe I'm assuming, um, I guess it would just be because almost every advisor must have that kind of situation somewhere in there. And my guess is they don't ask a lot about it because it's not just something they want to talk about. But my guess would be there's got to be some clues they can look for to say, hey, these people probably have a trust or there's a family something somewhere.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you'll see it. Sometimes you'll have the account.
Yeah.
Bob Smith, trustee for the Bob Smith Family Trust. That's a good one. Um, I think where we're seeing a lot of action right now is in the 50, 60-year olds. The kids are off to college now. The house is empty, and they're thinking about what's next. And they want to have the conversation because it's in their mind. And it's kind of twofold. What would happen to the family legacy if one of the spouses died immediately? The
Yeah.
second spouse, the surviving spouse may remarry. Well, now you're talking about a different, dispositive aspects of those family assets that maybe wasn't intended. So again, getting a trust in place to protect is
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, what we kind of discussed here for your typical advisor that they can, retain client assets better. That of course, makes sense because the trust can be in perpetuity or near perpetuity, right? It's
Yep.
very flexible, which
Yep.
again, from my trust background, other than sleeping under a desk, yes, it was a very flexible instrument. And then the opportunity to get new business out of it. So I just think that the brokers are loath to bring up stuff that they don't know about. They're like attorneys in that way. They don't like to bring up questions that they don't have an answer to. But I think if you can find a friendly trust, advocate with you, because the other thing we did mention was that very often the trust is adversarial to the advisor in that relationship.
It can be, and coming from the background that I had, I'm very accustomed to working with FAs. We want them at the center, of the equation, and we're just surrounding them. So it's
Yeah.
totally additive, and
Well,
that's why our assets are 4 times greater than just traditional trust, just a traditional brokerage account.
that's fantastic. All right. Well, that's a high note. I want to leave it on a high note. I feel like we hit a lot about trust, which is great, and I appreciate you sort of explaining some of the pieces to us. So thank you for doing that. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Tony. I appreciate the time.
Sure.